Welcome to New Hope Art and Design Studio for the Hidden Studio Tour. We're standing here in August. It's about 90 degrees, not quite our normal fall tour weather, but welcome. A lot of my images come from local surroundings. These, for example, are in the town of New Hope where I live. Things in the neighborhood that inspire me are kind of the buildings, and the topography of the land is very interesting for subject matter. These tend to be more complicated pieces, meaning I do studies and then finished paintings take a certain amount of time to do. When I'm traveling, I travel with a kit and often do a painting such as this one in one shot. This actually took 2 days of time in Italy. We were traveling through Italy and was done in a much shorter time with no preparatory sketches, but plein air as we were looking out at the view. Pieces that are from Lake Superior, a place we'd love to travel to. Again, these were both done on site with a little bit of finishing back in the studio, but quite a different look, I feel, compared to the ones that I work in the studio. This painting, for example, this is the New Hope Town Hall, just around the corner from me, and it's, as you can see, it's a larger format. So I tend to spend much more time on preparatory drawings for a piece like this, to the point where sometimes I feel by the time I get to the painting, I'm kind of tired of the whole subject. So on these larger pieces, the hardest thing for me to do is stay spontaneous and not get too wound up in detail I've already thought about too much. My medium is watercolor, so it's very hard to correct something once you've put paint on the paper. This is an interesting piece in the sense that when I first started this piece, I had a very dark cloud in mind, and the first thing I did is put a very dark stain. Well, I didn't realize how wet it was and immediately ran down the paper, and I thought, well, that's it. I've totally wasted that piece of paper. There's nothing I can do to save it. Well, in the end, just to entertain myself and to learn something about doing it, I scrubbed out some of the pieces, some of the trails you can see still there, but I scrubbed it out. And I thought it turned out to be a really great painting because I had to make everything else as vivid as the dark color that I'd started with. Most watercolors, you start with light values and we work your way to these darker values. But in this case, it was kind of interesting. I just tried to do it differently and start with a really dark value and then fill in with lights. And I kind of liked the way it worked out. With watercolor, like I said, it's very hard to fix mistakes, but sometimes mistakes allow you to get loose and not worry about it. Like I said, in this case, I thought I had made a mistake that would not allow this to be finished in a final way, but I thought just for an exercise, I'll just keep going and see what happens. So I think that looseness actually helped me a lot here. But one thing people enjoy is cards. So I've made prints over the years through the UW SP printing office, and I've made them into cards as well as prints. And it's a great way for people to be able to take something with them on the day of the tour and not be kind of a gut-wrenching high-cost item. So I have a lot of fun doing the cards because they turn out quite vivid, and people seem to like them. So that's been very good in terms of what sells. I've also got a number that work great for Christmas cards, and those always seem to be very popular with people. I was commissioned to do a series of paintings of the Nelsonville Mill by a patron in Nelsonville. So I did successfully complete that. I was kind of shocked because at first when I got the commission I was kind of nervous. Wasn't sure I could pull off something without somebody, accepting what I had done. But it turned out to be really fun to have a subject that I didn't have to worry about choosing. So I did a painting of the mill in each season. This is actually a print of one of those paintings. This is the spring painting, and it shows the mill from the south side, the Tomorrow River coming by it. These prints are available either framed, like you see here, or unframed with the mat. I have two different sizes, depending on the image. There's an 18 by 24, which is what this one is, and a smaller size. I believe that one is 12 by 16. Here's my workspace. I am a watercolorist, which means that the tools are really basic. That's one thing that attracted me to watercolor. There's no mixing of mediums. It's pretty much just paper. I tend to use D'Arches paper. I have used others, but I keep coming back to that fully rag paper. I'll do full sheets. This is a full sheet here I'm getting ready to do. Or I will do half sheets and even smaller, but usually I buy sheets, full sheets, and then cut them down for what I'm looking for. I use watercolors from Winsor & Newton's mostly because they're so permanent. The colors are very permanent. I have a variety of brushes here. I tend to use only 3 or 4 though all the time. These 3 are my favorites. And an ancient wash brush. I probably got this 30 years ago, and I'm really kind of bummed how it's disappearing because you can't get these anymore. It's a Grumbacher, but it's a natural bristle. It's for big washes. And I use these two for filling in. I've got some specialty brushes too, but for the most part, these are the workhorses. What else? I do use whiteout medium some. Try not to do too much whiting out because it tends to make you do things towards a certain direction rather than opening yourself up to what's happening on the paper. The hardest thing for me with watercolor is to be spontaneous because I have a background in architecture, rendering, and it's always a challenge to let things go, not visualize the finished product, but just kind of let it happen. I believe my most successful paintings are ones that I just got out of the way, put my brain on rest, and just let things happen on the paper. I think that's still true when I started, still true many years later, that spontaneity with watercolor is what makes it happen. I did watercolor for many years just as a sideline in between running a design business and everything else, never really had the space or the time to dedicate to it. But now that I have this room and a place to work, to leave things out and you know, prop them up around the room and kind of look at them, that has really allowed me to kind of dive in fully. What's interesting too is I've found that it's better for me to have 3 or 4 pieces going at once rather than concentrate solely on one piece. And I think that's, again, part of fooling your brain to relax and not think too hard about what you're doing and just respond to what's going on. A lot of times I'll start with photos for reference, but pretty shortly into the process, it becomes unrecognizable compared to what's happening on the paper. So I'll often use photos as a reference for, let's say, shadows, things like that, maybe size, maybe perspective, but very rarely color. Most of the time, color has very little value to me in a photograph versus what's happening on the paper. Here's where the framing starts. I've got some oak logs ready to go for the sawmill. Oak, maple, and cherry air drying after being sawed. They'll dry for 2 years. Out in the shop, I mill up the rough lumber into frame stock. Here you see cherry and oak waiting for the framer. Oak and cherry frames all ready to go. They've been oiled for a finish. When thinking about framing a picture, the first thing you start with is the mat and the colors that the mat will help accentuate in the painting. I look at different options to begin with and see visually what works. If the painting is particularly striking on its own, meaning the colors are fairly strong, I might go this route, but I'm going to see what else might pick up different things in the painting. Here's what a dark green inner mat with an outer mat of cream looks like. Notice how it picks up the darker colors in the painting and kind of brings the foreground forward. Kind of like that. The color of the wood frame can make a big difference too. Here is a pine frame, oiled. Here's a cherry frame. Notice how that is even deeper red and seems to do well with the green in the mat and the green in the picture. Here's the neutral matte combination again, cream on the outside, an inner one of white with the cherry frame. Notice how the neutral matte helps bring out the colors in the painting. The red of the cherry and the darkness also helps pull out the red in the painting, while at the same time contrasting with the green and blue in the painting. This I like a lot. Okay, the mats are cut. Put the frame pieces around to double check. Still like it? Good to go.